the people that moved into Crystal, and they felt that they were getting a step ahead of the game.
If you understand the history of Crystal in the small town feel, hey, this is a place that it existed before, it can exist now.
Crystal is a great place, and it still is one of the best kept secrets, I think.
The city of Crystal, Minnesota is a vibrant suburban community that has a rich history which is well worth exploring. We begin our exploration well before there was a Crystal and even a state of Minnesota. On March 3, 1849, during his last hours in office, President James K. Polk signed a bill adding the Minnesota Territory to the United States landscape. It wasn't until the early 1850s that the first settlers, John Ware Dow and John C. Bohannon, staked claim in the area. Fast forward to 1858, and Minnesota became a state, and many townships were formed in this area, including the Township of Brooklyn, the Township of Minneapolis, and the Township of Plymouth. Just a few years later, the Hennepin County government authorized the organization of a new area, which would be called the Crystal Lake Township.
In 1860 is when the Township of Crystal Lake was organized. So the original Township of Crystal Lake included Robbinsdale, as well as the Camden neighborhood of Minneapolis, the southernmost portion of Brooklyn Center, and of course Crystal and New Hope. The Crystal Lake Township was named after Crystal Lake.
That was the big lake, and they liked that lake, so they named the whole township after that lake, and they even named the Crystal Lake Cemetery after that name. And then Robbinsdale incorporated in 1887. So Crystal said, hey, we better do something, otherwise the city is going to be gone.
And it was at that point in which they decided to organize as the Village of Crystal.
The official village incorporation took place on January 11, 1887, with the first election of village officers happening a few months later. The original village population was about 587. While the move to become a village brought greater organization and identity, it also brought something that became a sore point for some in the area. Some believe that this sore point led to some trying times for the village.
Because the farmers didn't like being taxed for street lights and sewer services that they weren't taken advantage of because they're still farmers.
They were charged $1.50 a year for taxes for the lamplighter in Camden, because this was the urban sprawl.
Their incorporation lapsed. And at first I thought that was maybe a purposeful thing because, again, people don't like paying taxes. So after a few years paying taxes to the village of Crystal, they might have thought, oh, this isn't any better. So, but I actually don't think it was purposeful, because I found a newspaper clipping from February of that year trying to get a bill passed to allow villages to reincorporate without waiting the required 6 months. This reincorporation must have failed, because instead the village of Robbinsdale incorporated, taking up what was once the downtown area of the village of Crystal. Due to this, there was no hurry to reincorporate. That was in 1893. It wasn't until 1911 that there was pressure again to incorporate, to not be annexed into Minneapolis. At this time, both Brooklyn Center and Crystal incorporated. Crystal included what is today both Crystal and New Hope, but the same story played out. The farmers didn't like being taxed, so the less populated western side of the village broke off and formed the Township of New Hope in 1936. The boundaries were in flux as property developed, which went on until 1953.
So 100 years after what started as a very large area known as the Crystal Lake Township, the city of Crystal now had the shape and the boundaries that we see today. What we now know as Crystal officially became a city in 1960.